Hello again, my name's Sam Abbott, and I work with Bean Group as a real estate professional in the greater Monadnock region and Souhegan Valley of southern New Hampshire. And so, like I've said in the last few videos, we're just looking at a few things that you can consider that you can ask any realtor that you're planning to work with, that you're interviewing, basically, that you're thinking about hiring either to represent you in a purchase or in a sale. And so this is regarding compensation, right? And this is a pretty big conversation, and so I'll try to keep it as short and sweet as I can, as it were. So thinking from the seller's perspective, right? When I go into a listing appointment, the seller asks me, all right, so what's the fee, or what's your commission, right? And what I say, I charge, for me personally, I will not work for less than 3%. Right? That doesn't mean that that's the full burden, right, for the seller. The seller is responsible in the state of New Hampshire for paying the full real estate commission, right? You have to incentivize the buyer agency firm in order to upload your listing into the multiple listing service. Again, bigger conversation. If anybody's curious about the particulars of that, feel free to reach out to me directly, and I'd be happy to explain it to you, right? So what I say, again, I won't work for less than 3% as a listing agent. That means you still have to offer out the buyer agency incentive, right? And so I say minimum is 2%, right? So that's a total of 5%, right? But I suggest offering 2.5% because we all work on an incentive basis, and they're just going to be, the buyer's agent is going to be more inclined to want to sell your house than they are the other two. It's just that simple, right? It's based on incentive, right? And so that segues into buyer agency, right? When I take on a new buyer client, it's part of the conversation is indeed this, it's compensation, right? I work for 2.5% on the buyer agency side, right? And so what that means is that even if the listing agent, right, the listing firm is only offering 2%, that other 0.5% is still due to me at closing from my clients, the buyers, as an additional closing cost to them, right? And so, a lot of people would say, oh my God, what's that? How could you charge more money, blah, blah, blah. Buyer's agency is supposed to be free and this and that. I charge it because, again, when I take on, like I've said in previous videos, a little more serious, when I take on a buyer client, there's a lot more work involved. I shouldn't say that. There's a lot more time involved typically, right? Because we're out driving around, we're looking at houses, etc. With listings, I have several appointments to get the house ready for sale, but then a lot of it I do from my office, right? I don't need to be literally out, boots on the ground, in your face all the time looking at houses, right? Or showing the property in most cases, right? So what's that mean? So I charge 2.5%, they have to come up with the other 0.5% at closing. What is more common is that you'll find an agent who doesn't even talk about forming a buyer's agency, agreement, right? There's no sort of an agency relationship. They just say, meet me at the house, and you're just showing property with them, right? It's important to understand that in that situation, you are not represented by that agent. In the state of New Hampshire, I'm not licensed in any other state and can't speak to the legalities there. But in the state of New Hampshire, you are not being represented by that agent until you form an agency relationship in writing, a contractual relationship, right? You might be able to argue something differently in a court of law, but that is the general understanding, right? That you are working with them on a customer basis, right? That they owe you ministerial duties, but they do not owe you fiduciary duties, right? What's fairly common, I think, is then you'll get the buyer agency agreement slid across the table when it's time to offer on a house, and they say sign here and sign here, right? When I meet with a buyer initially, we talk about what their goals are. I talk about what I can offer, how I could help with that. And then we look at the buyer agency agreement. And if they're willing and ready to move forward, we form an agreement. They become my clients or the clients of my firm. I represent them. Now I'm going to bat and trying to find them a house. So it's a bit of a distinction. I work on a client level basis, not primarily, almost entirely, not on a customer basis, right? So again, sellers, typically between 5 and 6% in our greater market. Sometimes lower, sometimes higher, but that's kind of gets you in the ballpark, right? And then again, what are we offering out to the buyer agency fee? Typically 2 to 2.5%, sometimes as much as 3%, right? And the buyer side, again, have they presented you with a buyer agency agreement? Is that something you've talked about? Have you talked about compensation? If not, the question to ask yourself is, do I want them to represent me as a client, or do I want them to represent me as a customer? Right? As a client, they have your best interests in mind. As a customer, they do not. Point blank. That's the law. That's the way that it's written. Okay, so some things to consider there, right? And again, with any of these videos, it's fairly brief, but if you have questions, additional questions, if something I say was too fast or doesn't make sense, send me an email, right? My information is all available on the page, but it's sam@samabbottsellshomes.com. Again, I'm not going to start spamming you or anything. I'll speak to it. This is all I do for a living, right? So thank you